And joining me now from Toronto is Ruth Markel. Welcome to the CJN Daily.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you, CJN. I have a long history, positive history, with the Community Jewish News, Canadian Jewish News. I worked in Montreal. I was Director of Program Management at Jewish Family Services Social Service Center. We had lots of programs, and of course, you were always there covering it. And later on, I moved to Toronto, and we had a lot of nice coverage on some of the difficult issues, such as emergency preparedness, which I worked with in the hospitals and Jewish organizations. So I am really delighted to be here, and I'm even more delighted because this has been an American story, and I would love the Canadian audience, and particularly the Jewish audience, to know about my book.
Why? Well, I'll jump right in. Why do you think that it's not been so covered well by Canadian media, as opposed to blanket coverage in the States? What do you think is the reason?
It's a really different, and it's not even a complicated answer. First of all, the book is called The Unveiling, and it's a mother's reflection on murder, grief, and the trial life. And my son, Dan Markel, was born in Montreal, grew up in Toronto, but left at 17, 18 to go to Harvard. And he never came back. So he went to Harvard undergrad, went to Harvard Law School, went to England, went to Israel. A lot of nice things, brought me our family lots of nachas, as they say. And he became very internationally acclaimed in the States in two ways: as a legal scholar, and more specifically, that he started something called Prof's Blog, which was for young professors and young law students. So he had a whole international profile, and he was followed by lots of places. To me, I love him as the father of my grandchildren and so on. But the point is that most of the people who he knew really were from the American community, particularly the American legal community and Jewish community.
I want to ask you about the book, because I know that it's just starting to come out in terms of your media appearances, pre-orders, what have you. But I want to ask you about the writing process for the book. Can you sort of tell us just the mechanics of when you started, how the idea came, and how long it took you?
I actually started very early. I probably, in my own world of initial grief, I didn't start to write a book. I started to basically keep a chronological list of events. And that actually really helped me later on, which was a few years later, where I started to really write, as I call it. But the first stage was just so much was happening so quickly. We were overwhelmed. Murder's not even a word in my vocabulary. And and it was totally covered all over the world. And so that was sort of my initial thing, was just to start and to keep this record of what was happening, when it was happening, what was I feeling a little bit at the time. I did put some personal comments into these episodes of experience. And later, much later, it was actually before the pandemic, which is funny, because this book was written during the pandemic, which was excellent for me because I'm always looking for projects. But I actually knew I was writing this book in early 2019, not the end. And then after the trials, which occurred in September 2019, I went to New York, and I knew now I'm writing, getting a publisher and an agent and the whole business. And that's how I started. So I really wrote the real story. And it's a long story and a personal story during the pandemic.
So about this writing of the book, what do you hope people will see the purpose of the book is when they get it? Why do this?
The book is called, and I'm going to go with the title first. The title explains everything. The title is called The Unveiling. And the reason I chose that title is it's for twofold. This is the initial part of the book is about grief and one of the things that in my personal experience was at the very beginning, I was sad. I was in a daze. I was in an out of body experience at a certain point. It was hard, but it was only when I started to actually, after we selected the monument and start to go to the gravesite and see the monument and covered it. You know, as you know, the Jewish tradition is you have basically a piece of fabric which covers the monument. It was at that point that like it just hit me like I could have collapsed and gone underground myself. And that the reason why I chose the title, it's the beginning of my grief journey. I won't tell you that before I was playing because I wasn't, but this was different. The deepening, the impact and so forth of actually seeing the monument on the gravesite. And we talk about that even in the Jewish religion, the finality of it, right? This is what's really the effect. So that was one reason. And the other reason is nothing to do with me personally, but I want to lift the curtain on homicide victims and others suffering from violence and so forth. And that's what the book is about. One of the things that crime stories, whether it's on TV, my own story, Dan's story, you know, it has a lot of glamour, a lot of sensationalism. There's, you know, fast cars, there's all kinds of arrests, there's anything you want to find in this story, even things like Peyton Place, you know, has relationships with who and so forth, is there in the real story. But what is not in the real story at all, and all of the people who are suffering now, is what is it like to be a homicide victim? What does it feel like? What is the family going through? And this is now not only, you know, for crime victims, the mass shootings in the States. I mean, we're living in an era, and, you know, 1 million people died in the States from the pandemic. I don't know the exact statistics in Canada, but they're not small either. So a lot of families are suffering, and they're really suffering. So for me, the whole point was, let's talk about what is it like to be behind the scenes. And the other reason I wrote it is about the trial life. And that trial life, when as soon as something happens, I mean, we had in Canada the Iranian issue with the planes going down, there's investigations. You start to have to be involved in a very intense court system that you don't have the experience with, you don't have, you know, the language of crime is a whole new vocabulary. And so this is the purpose of the book.
And so you said that, or some people have said that, you know, you have lots of experience in terms of social work and dealing with your professional training, and then married to this whole grief journey. Would you say now that you're on the other side of the writing and that the book is about to launch, that it's been helpful to you and your family to have gone through this writing process?
I think that the grief process continues. And there's the founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving has the best expression. I think her name, I believe, I have to look it up again, is Candace Lighton, I believe. But that's not the point. How she defines grief: there's a beginning, a middle, and the rest of your life. So the rest of your life with grief is, the book doesn't end the grief. The book is a way of finding some meaning and then continuing on with the lifestyle. Yeah, now our lifestyle is simple because it's a conspiracy murder with a lot of arrests. So we're going back to trials continuously. And so there's the life is a roller coaster, and you're always going in and out of having hearings and so forth. In fact, one is coming up June 29th. So this is not going to alleviate the grief. What it allows the book to do for me and others is it helps find meaning. And then it helps you as having sort of what I would call a way out of just not living through the most difficult moments.
I'm aware that you were able to see your American grandchildren earlier this year. Can you describe how that went? And yeah, because I'm sure people would want to know after that long separation.
Well, I think people may not be aware there was a long separation, so maybe I'll just go back.
Right.
The first 2 years in 2014, when Dan was murdered, I don't like using the word, but it's the fact. And we saw the children, so what I would call Benjamin and Lincoln, Dan's boys, for 2 years. And then after there were some arrests in Florida and Garcia, Rivera, and then later on Catherine McManua were in jail. So the situation changed dramatically, and we were cut off in 2015. So that was 2016. In 2015, Wendy, Dan's ex and my ex, the daughter-in-law, actually changed the names from Markel to Adelson. So there was a whole 6-year period which we never saw the grandchildren, and that became the hardest thing for me. It was difficult to lose Dan, but here you have living children, right? Living family members and important ones that you were cut off from, and that was exceptionally sad. So what happened was over 3 years, I shouldn't say just last year, after the trial in Tallahassee in 2019, it was my birthday, but I call myself a joke, but a hairdresser junkie, as I would describe it. And I went to this hairdresser, and this young woman comes over to me. She says, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Sure," because I knew where I was already all over the media for the last few days and so forth. And I said, "Sure." So she says, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Grandparent alienation." So she says, "Done." Now I had sat on this, and I do want to talk about this message. When any grieving parent or any person has lost somebody, you think in your mind, you asked me before, how do you memorialize the person? What do you want to do? And every parent, every family member, even friends, really good friends, have always done things to help create a memory for that person. And somebody told me 3 years, so this is 2016, I only, would use the Jewish expression, moved my tuchus until 2019, because I sat on it. Our American lawyer told me that I have to write a bill. How do I write a bill? I'm sitting in Canada, I'm gonna write a bill in Florida. And then all my other friends sort of mentored me and said, now's the time, you better think about it. And they volunteered different aspects, but you're gonna need lobbyists. So here I am, I sat on it for 3 years. And why I wanna mention this is there's a lot of other families who wanna do something. They know what they wanna do. This is the important piece of this message. They know what they wanna do, but things hold you back. In my case, it was a whole trial. There was a whole crime journey. And then all of a sudden I was ready. And so what happened was, just lucked in, this person, her name is Karen Halpern. She happened to know very well the whole government system. And this is October where I met her. In January, we had a bill that was first passed in the Senate. And it didn't go to the House at that time, to the House of Representatives. There was not enough time. In 2021, we did a workshop, but in 2022, we were successful. So it passed the Senate and unanimously in Florida. And then it passed the House of Representatives. And it was just signed now, June 24th, by Governor DeSantis. So we're elated, because this is a real important piece of legislation which allows grandparents under certain circumstances, if the spouse was involved in anything civilly or criminally, where you go to court and it's understood that you're going to get visitation rights. So this is, you can't ask for more. And this has been really a phenomenal experience and what you'd call a success feeling.
Right, but backdate a couple of months, you were invited to see them for the first time in person, and you went.
Yes.
that's the first time in a long time. How did that go? What did you do on the visit?
Well,
You can say.
yeah. So what happened actually in February of 2022, we were actually supposed to have Catherine McManaman's trial. The trial was then changed to May 16th, and we suddenly got a note from Wendy advising us that there is a bar mitzvah coming up in May. And it was very similar and very timely to the new trial, but at the same time, very timely to the fact that legislation had just passed in both the House and the Senate. So what happened was she invited us to the bar mitzvah. We said we want to go, we're excited. And then I said to her, can we see the boys? We hadn't seen them for 6 years, for ice cream on the day before. So she said, if you want an in-person visit, come in April. And we did. We went on the plane early in the morning, and we saw the children. They're not children anymore. They're big boys. And it was amazing. And that was, the best experience that we could have. And that was on April 20th of 2022. I'm giving the dates because we come back to Toronto. Phil and I went, and we come back, and the next morning, 6 a.m. in the morning, Charlie Adelson was arrested. So that's her brother. So, wow, like 24 hours, two big breakthroughs in this whole story, one on the criminal side and one on the grandparents' side. So that was our experience.
It was from the high to the low, though, because now you can't see them for the bar mitzvah, I heard. Is that right?
Right, that's correct. Yeah,
but are you able to email them, FaceTime them, or no?
Well, we're going to try. We have to keep this door open. This is my mantra right now. I did ask I wanted Shelley's children, that's my Canadian grandchildren. At this age, if everybody has at least a picture of their faces, so they Zoomed. They did a Zoom just recently, which is fabulous. So I'm hoping to keep this door open. It's a tough door to keep open, but we have to keep trying.
Now, you mentioned a lot of things about cost to you health-wise as well as emotionally and things, but in terms of the actual 8 years of being involved in the trial life, this must have been enormously costly financially for your family to go to Florida, come back, hire lawyers and all this stuff, right? Can you speak to that aspect, which maybe victims' families aren't aware of, that it's going to cost them too if they want to be involved?
There are different things. I will say a little bit, and I don't know about it in other states, but there's something that Florida does have initially, not where we are now, but there are two things. There are some victims' rights, and there are some victims' compensation in the very initial stages. So when after, let's say, the murder, there's some victims' compensation that has to go towards a funeral. Okay, so that's a very early, let's call it, contribution. In this case, I think you know, so we don't pay the prosecutor. We have a lot of other costs, but we do not pay the prosecutors because they manage the whole criminal journey and the whole case. But there are many costs. There's costs, of course, travel and other things, and even if there's some victim, small grants, they're minimal. But the idea being that the big pieces of the legal case are covered. We have a lot of very, very, how do I say, magnificent support, I will call it, coming originally from some of Dan's friends and some of the large law firms who liaison with us. Some of it is pro bono, some of it's not. But the point I'm making is, there's a lot of interest in this case, and there is a lot of support, but there's a lot of expenses. And I think, to me, the physical expenses are much more than the actual, monetary expenses.
There's been a lot of sort of internet sleuths, internet supporters, I don't know, Reddit, all these true crime people, that you probably never even thought that you would even have a clue about this before this murder happened, right? It was not something you were familiar with. But how important have they been to you and your family throughout this process?
I think it's actually it is, they are very supportive, but I'm going to back off here a little bit and say how it works. So I don't follow them directly, but I would tell you that Phil, Shelley, and I have, all of us have networks of friends. And some of our friends are more entangled, or you want to call it obsessed, or whatever word you want to use, in following this, right? And they follow all of the, whether it's web sleuths, Reddit, it doesn't matter what, and other people, a lot of other people who we know too, like will send something in. And so indirectly, I do follow it. And there have been, for the most part, it's never been critical to us. There are a couple comments, here and there about certain things we should be doing, but it's mostly quite supportive. And occasionally there's some, not Canadian friends, but some people, like there's somebody in New Zealand, there's somebody elsewhere, they become obsessed with the case, and they follow it, and they do some very intense, and I will call it forensic investigation. This becomes passed on to me. And on a few occasions, I actually passed it on to the FBI to show you. So there are some valuable insights coming out of other people's forensic interest in this whole story.
So you've started with the media interviews in the States about the book. What's the reception been so far from these reviews?
It's outstanding. Well, we've had support before. Dateline NBC is coming. I'm speaking to them, in fact, this afternoon. They're coming to Toronto next week, 2 weeks from now, to tape another session. This is their third session. I don't know if it'll be 2 hours, but I think it will be. They have done it before. And so you don't ask for much better than that, right? In terms of, and we had a phenomenally successful podcast, which I didn't have anything to do with it in terms of design, but it's Over My Dead Body by Wondery. I think it's already, I say 10 million. Somebody told me the other day there's been more than 20 million listeners, but I know I think I'm up to 10 million. And that particular podcast was just bought out by Apple TV. So Apple TV is not so much buying the podcast as much as the sessions. The 8 sessions from the Over My Dead Body will be on TV. My experience so far, because we just pre-announced it a few weeks ago, not even a few weeks ago, has been excellent. So the Tallahassee community, which is, my groundstone, right? Excuse me, has already, I've been on ABC, Tallahassee TV, NBC, a few others. Tomorrow I have another program. So the support from the initial publicity for really at this stage to pre-order the book is really great.
So the end of July, you mentioned earlier, but it's all in the news. There's 2 big court things happening, right? There's the sentencing for Katie and the first court appearance for the brother. Are you going? Are you invited? Do you get to go?
We can go, but we are doing it. The judge has initiated a Zoom, which we've done for a few of the sessions. So this particular hearing, no, we're not going in person, but we are participating in 2 parts. One is the Zoom aspect, and the other part is it's sentencing like this is where they do victim impact statements. So this is an opportunity for us, and for Danny had a lot of friends the last time who have submitted victim impact statements. So the previous judge, because this is a new judge, had a sizable amount of paper that he had to read. But the family are the ones that, in general, it doesn't have to be the family ones that actually are kind of, let's call it, read out loud, or someone from the family, and the others are given to the judge as part of the sentencing.
Have you written it yet?
I've written it before, and I have to make some changes to it, but it's, yes.
I've seen you give it to them. What did the children, what did Ben and Lincoln know, if anything, about this whole story, since they're living with the family that's suspected of doing the murder? Do they know anything?
they have been protected, let's call it, and shielded in some ways, not to be overexposed. But I don't have a real good sort of knowledge of what they know and they don't know.
Is there any possibility or any dream that you will get custody of those kids?
There's certain criteria. It isn't our intention to get custody. It is also a process that we would not have any control over. This is all now would be through the Florida courts if there were situations that the courts felt that anything could be possible. But this is not where we want to be. We want the children to have as much of a normal life as they can have. And I'm most worried about their long-term mental health, which is, a real worry versus custody kinds of issues, which are not on my mind right now.
Is there anything that you would like to add about the fact that we're talking about the book here in Canada? Anything you want our audience to know?
Well, I do want the audience really to know that this is a story. It's a terrible story, horrendous story, but you can move from what I call grief to promise. There is hope, there is resilience, and the important part is to, at some point, define yourself again and find meaning, which is what I did through the advocacy work with the grandparent legislation. So, and other families have things on their mind, or it's just a question of, finding your place again along another kind of journey. Not to say that the grief is going away. And that's the important point here. You acknowledge the grief, but then there's a real important time. And I don't like the words move on, and I don't like any of those kinds of words because they are not the ones that you should be choosing, but it's an internal sort of discussion with yourself. And that's an important one to decide how you might want to redefine yourself, how you might want to go from grief to promise to something else. It can be done. That's the message.
Well, it's not over yet for you at all. As you said, it's a trial life, as you called it, a roller coaster. So we'll obviously be watching very carefully in the next few weeks because big things are about to happen. And I want to thank you and wish you good luck with the book. I'm sure it'll fly off the shelves.